they revert back into their old, unhealed pain story. And so if they were raised in an environment that wasn't super empathetic, loving, kind, they might get really triggered when things get hard. And then that trigger changes their physiology and it makes them behave and react in a way that is not a way that they're proud of.
I think I've experienced that,
Mm.
but I haven't experienced that lately. I experienced that when I was, let's say, in my 20s. I can remember a time where I was trying to communicate with someone and I knew that it was coming out wrong,
Mm.
but I was either too naive, too arrogant, or too foolish to realize it was coming out wrong. So I just said that, you know what? I'm gonna commit to this thing all the way until the wheels fall off. And I committed to it. I committed to it. And then afterwards, you see on the person's face, they're like, yeah, we all know that that was the worst way to say what I was trying to say. What are maybe some of the tips that we can find out that, okay, I've caught myself saying something that isn't the best way to say it, but I either going to commit to it fully and be that jackass, or I'm going to say, okay, let me take a step back and let me try to say it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes on inside us. I heard it said so clearly a while back, several years ago. Someone was just like, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?" So having the humbleness to stop and say, "Yeah, I'm not doing a good job of this. I'm possibly creating pain as I'm trying to do this." That's on me to adapt the way that I'm communicating or the message that I'm trying to say so that my recipient gets it and can take it on. That's on the speaker, that's on the communicator to adapt. And it can take you kind of have to brush your ego aside and say, you know what? I thought I was right in communicating it this way. Maybe I'm not right. Here's a great example. Okay, this is from my marriage. I've been married 16 years now. And when I first was dating this guy, when I would talk and tell stories, he would make this gesture like, get on with it, get to the point. And I was like, that is so rude. And after that, like, frustrating, angry argument happened more than once, I was like, maybe I'm the one being rude. Like, he doesn't want to be communicated this way. So I changed my strategy, and now it's like headlines like this. It's like, I took the dog to the vet today. She's fine. And he'll be like, cool. And if he wants further details, he's going to ask for them. If he doesn't care, then he won't, and we're fine. I was still heard. My message got across in a way that he could understand. And now we're happy.
Do you think sometimes it's just as simple as that, where we just need to simplify what we're trying to
Yes.
say instead of trying to overcomplicate it?
I think that's really big. And I think a lot of people have the need to share a lot and fast. I have one friend who everything she says, she has to has an explanation for why she did that thing. Every single thing. So how was your weekend? Which could be like a simple, yeah, it was really good. I had a great time. Ends up being this 5-10 minute explanation of like why she made every single choice she made that weekend. And it's not necessary. It's overcomplicated. And again, if I want more information, I can ask for information. So I think you're spot on. I think we can simplify, make our messages more clear. And I think that simplification has to come from a lot of conscious intention because if I'm thinking into old Tonya, who before I, got a lot of trauma out of my body, one of my main pain points from my upbringing and my life was I'm not heard. Nobody's listening to me. And so I just talked and talked and talked because I was like hoping somebody would like catch on to something when I was actually being counterproductive.
Think we struggle with that. There's someone, what she does is similar to what you mentioned with your friend. She'll say something, then try to justify it. Say something, then explain it. Say something, justify it. And I remember one time I went to her and she was telling me something. And I was like, okay, I can't wait for the part where you try to justify it. Like, where's the justification part? And she sat back, she's like, oh my God, you're right. And the funny thing is about her, at least what I found funny, was she's trying to justify anything. So it could be like something that's good, and she'll try to justify it and over explain it. It could be something that's bad, same thing. And I asked her, I'm like, why do you think you need to always go out of your way to make sure that the person understands and you're justifying it? And she turned to me and said, you know what, Torian? There is things that I want to talk about in my life, and the people around me didn't want to hear it,
Yep.
whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. Do you think that maybe that could be one of the reasons where some people prolong the conversation just because they know in their past no one's actually listening? So it's a way to keep them as close as possible and engage because they know as soon as they stop talking, they're going to disappear.
That's exactly it. And that comes from this unresolved old pain. And it doesn't need to be big, macro traumatic events. Like these are the micro traumatic events that happen as we're getting raised that we internalize and we make stories up about. And then we decide unconsciously, this is all happening under the surface. My feet are currently wrapped around my microphone cord. Okay. Um, I was all bound up there. Uh, and, and so then they create these unconscious patterns that often lead us to behave in ways that we're not proud of. So we have to go back and heal those old wounds, however that ends up looking, whether that's through therapy, whether that's through coaching, whether that's through whatever it is, psychedelics, I don't know. However, everyone there's different ways to climb a mountain, right? But we have to heal those old wounds so that we can come to our conversations, our relationships feeling whole. And then something weird is going to happen where we are going to be heard, even if we're saying less, because we believe we matter more. Our recipient is going to take on that energy too. That's all a bit woo woo, I suppose, but I think it's accurate.
I think so too. I think it's something that maybe we're holding on to, and it's interesting to see how one thing can change someone's entire course. Like you can have someone, they're dating someone and they just don't pay attention. They don't even give the impression that they care about their day, care about their emotional needs, care about their mental requirements. And then you have someone maybe who has had like a difficult childhood, where as a child maybe they felt like they weren't heard by their parents, or is always my way or the highway. They couldn't even voice anything that they wanted. So when they carry that on into their childhood, they're like, Tanya, help me. I have no idea how to talk to people. I was told how to form words, but I wasn't told how to use my words to express my emotions. And ladies, I know there's a lot of men out there that you're like, oh, Terrain, he doesn't talk to me. How am I going to get him to open up? But I think we have to start by understanding where they are
Yes.
and then try to get them to cross that bridge because we sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, and maybe you are too, we ask people to, instead of making a step forward, we ask them to make a leap. And for some people, it's too far. It's too far of a jump because if they were to take that leap, take that jump, they're thinking, I can't make it. I'm going to fall off the edge of the cliff. I'm going to fall into the pit of spikes. I'm going to not be able to recover. And there's this beautiful picture that I saw. I think it was a meme or a GIF, whatever these youngsters call it, Tanya, these days. And the person, and there's two people, one on one side of there's one person on one edge, and there's another person on the other edge, and there's no bridge. The bridge is damaged. One person reaches out and the person's like, just jump. And the other person who's being told to jump, they're looking at the person and they're looking at the floor. And in their mind, they're like, I just can't make it. Where the other person is looking straight at that person and just saying, I got you. How difficult do you think it is for people to trust again after being so hurt from their past?
Yeah, if that was a message that they never got, that I am stable, solid, reliable, and I got you, if that was something that was missed in their childhood, and very unlikely that it was missed on purpose, but very likely that their caregivers were just acting from their own underdeveloped emotional maturity, then it's going to be really hard to do that once they leave the family unit and try to go and make their way in the world. It's going to be really hard to be able to accept that hand that's being extended. And we might push it away. We might be violent to it. We might do a lot of things to it because we don't trust that it's actually going to have us. And we can kind of bring this metaphor back into real life. It's the person that might be in a relationship but actually staying quite distant. Maybe that means there's sort of a hyper independence where they're doing most things on their own. They don't want to take the next step and, whatever that means for the progression of the relationship. They don't want to move in, they don't want to get engaged, whatever the thing is. But they find a way of sort of being together but separate because they can't fully put their heart there, put their heart on the line. What if it gets crushed? What if it gets damaged? And we can certainly move through life with those types of fears and questions. And people like Brene Brown would suggest that when we go through life in that way, we're never going to have anything meaningful in our lives. We need that vulnerability to be intimate and to create partnerships. And if you didn't have that modeled to you or taught to you as a child, it is healable. Whatever patterns are playing out now in your relationships for folks listening and watching, it's something that you learned over time. It was something that you practiced well, whether it was avoiding or being really eagerly attached to someone. It's something that you learned to as a way of coping with your situation when you were young. And because it was learned, it's something that can be unlearned. And so approaching that type of unlearning, I think, needs to start with a willingness where you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm willing to change things inside myself. Or if you're not there yet, I'm willing to consider changing things within myself. And just let that be a little mantra. It's like this, I'm, uh, you see a store, you're like, do I want to go in? Maybe after I have lunch, I'll go in. But after a while of telling yourself, I'm willing to consider changing, you can, you'll know that, oh, actually, now there's a willingness to do it. And you can let that be the mantra then for the next little while. I'm willing to change within myself. And eventually, then you're just ready and you can just make the changes and whatever that looks like. If you need professional help, if you can do it on your own.
How scary do you think being confronted with that change is for
Mm.
the person who maybe was aware that they needed to change and they just chose to ignore it, or that someone brings it to their attention and now it's their understanding that, okay, this is a pillar of my relationship that I need to resolve sooner than later?
Hmm. Yeah. So there's a fear, I think, around the unknown. That would be a really common general thing to say. And then there's another layer in this. So the unknown being, if I do commit and trust and take that leap, if I do that, I don't know what's going to happen next because I've never had that. I've never had that experience. So there's the fear of the unknown. What does that mean? And then also there's the fear of, well, what if I get hurt? What if we don't know, right? That is a possibility, but who knows? But then there's another layer to this, which is how the unconscious mind prefers the status quo, even though it may not be the most helpful, productive, growth oriented in terms of your own personal development, but because it's comfortable, because it's always been that way. And so our unconscious minds will choose the path of least resistance. And so not only do we need to override these conscious fears of like, oh, what if something happens, but also we have to override this unconscious, deep, anchored desire to stay exactly as we are. So that's hella scary. I mean, I don't, on a scale, I'd put it at like a 10 out of 10 scary.
Yeah, and it's something that you can hold on to for so long. Like we
Yeah.
hear sometimes like the joke that a lot of people spend a lot of time in their own echo chamber, meaning that hanging around with the same people
Mm.
who are stuck in the same mindset, and then there's always the famous quote, right? Misery loves company. So if you're the type of person that doesn't want to change and you have to make a decision, do I hang around people who want to make that change or do I hang around people who don't want to make that change because that could be so much safer for a lot of people. And I can see why there's like this story online where they say single people keep people single
Mm. Hmm.
is because it's easier in the beginning to unite people with a common dislike of something. Meaning that, okay, you know what? I don't want to communicate properly. Oh, I dislike it. It's scary. They should just be able to understand. And then you go to someone like, oh, yeah, I did the same thing. So now you're talking about the same thing you like. But I think it takes more effort and is more long lasting when you unite through love, which is why ideally marriage, for example, when it works, it's such a beautiful thing and it lasts for such a long time. What would you advise to someone who is maybe trapped in a situation where everyone around them is experiencing the same resistance to a change and they don't necessarily want to be like the people around them, but they just don't see an escape because it's so much safer to know the devil that you do know versus the devil that you still have to get to know.
Yeah, facing that type of decision, there's all going to be a lot of struggle with that because you're getting support from that group. There's camaraderie there. There is